The morning I found that worn leather wallet tucked behind the frozen peas at Hannigan's grocery, I had exactly $17.32 to my name. It was a Tuesday in early October, and the leaves in Millbrook, Indiana were just starting to turn that perfect shade of amber that made the whole town look like it was wrapped in an old photograph. I was reaching for the cheapest bag of vegetables I could find when my fingers brushed against something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. The freezer air bit at my hand as I fumbled behind the bags, and for a second I thought maybe it was just a piece of cardboard or someone's forgotten shopping list. But when I pulled it out, I found myself holding this old brown wallet that looked like it had traveled through decades. The leather was soft from years of handling, worn smooth at the corners, and there was a faded eagle embossed on the front that you could only see when the fluorescent lights hit it just right. My first thought was to turn it into customer service. That's what you do, right? That's what I'd taught Emma to do. But then I noticed how thick it was, how heavy in my hand. The store was mostly empty at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning. Just me, a stock boy pricing soup cans 3 aisles over, and Dolores at the register painting her nails between customers. I glanced around, then opened the wallet. My breath caught in my throat. There had to be at least $2,000 in there, maybe more. All in crisp $100 bills, the kind that felt new and important between your fingers. The kind I hadn't held in longer than I wanted to admit. For a moment, just a moment, I thought about my overdue electric bill. The yellow notice was still stuck to my refrigerator, threatening disconnection if I didn't pay $347 by Friday. I thought about the fact that I'd been eating ramen noodles for the past week because my hours at the warehouse had been cut from 40 to 25. About how Emma had been wearing the same pair of sneakers for almost a year, the soles starting to separate from the canvas, and how she'd stopped asking for new ones because she knew what the answer would be. I thought about the secondhand science kit she'd circled in a catalog for her birthday, the one I'd pretended not to see because even $20 was too much. $2,000. It would fix everything. The electric bill, new shoes for Emma, actual groceries that contained vegetables that didn't come from a can. Maybe even enough left over to get the grinding noise in my car looked at before winter really set in. But then I saw the driver's license tucked into the clear plastic window. Walter Eugene Fitzgerald, age 87. In the photo, he had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and one of those faces that looked like it had smiled through a lot of years. His white hair was neatly combed, and he wore a red plaid shirt that reminded me of my own grandfather, gone 10 years now. There was something else in that wallet, too. Tucked behind the bills was a folded piece of paper so old it was almost falling apart at the creases. The paper felt like tissue in my hands, soft and delicate, like it might dissolve if I breathed on it wrong. I carefully opened it and found a black and white photograph of a young soldier standing next to a pretty girl in a 1950s dress. She had dark curls pinned up and was laughing at something, her hand on his arm. He stood straight and proud in his uniform, but his eyes were only on her. On the back, in faded blue ink that had gone purple with age, Betty and me before shipping out to Korea, 1951. That's when I knew I couldn't keep this money. Not from him, not from anyone really, but especially not from Walter Eugene Fitzgerald, who kept a 70-year-old photo in his wallet like a talisman. The address on his license showed he lived on Sycamore Lane, which I knew was on the other side of town, past the railroad tracks and the old Miller factory that had been closed since before Emma was born. I glanced at my watch, the black sports watch I'd bought at a dollar store when my good one broke. I had about an hour before I needed to pick up Emma from school. I could drop off the wallet and still make it in time, if traffic wasn't bad, and if my car didn't decide today was the day to finally give up. I left the frozen peas behind. At $2.99, they were a luxury I couldn't afford anyway, and headed out to my beat-up Honda Civic. The car was more rust than metal at this point, held together by hope and duct tape. The engine made that grinding noise it had been making for months, the one I'd been ignoring because I couldn't afford to fix whatever was wrong. The mechanic had quoted me $800 last time I'd asked. Might as well have been $8,000. As I drove across town, I watched Millbrook transform around me. The neighborhoods gradually got nicer, the houses got bigger, the lawns got greener and actually had those little edges where someone cared enough to trim them properly. There were sidewalks instead of just gravel shoulders, and the fire hydrants weren't covered in rust. Kids played in yards with swing sets that weren't held together with prayers and zip ties. Sycamore Lane was like something out of a storybook, a tree-lined street with those big old houses that had probably been there since the town was founded. Massive oaks and maples created a canopy overhead, their leaves filtering the morning sunlight into patches of gold and shadow. Number 47 was a white two-story with a wraparound porch and flower boxes under every window. It had green shutters and one of those old-fashioned porch swings that creaked in the slight breeze. But as I got closer, pulling into the cracked concrete driveway, I noticed things weren't as perfect as they'd seemed from the street. The paint was peeling in places, long strips of it curling away from the wood siding. The flower boxes were empty except for dried-up soil and the skeletal remains of what might have been petunias. The lawn needed mowing. Grass had grown up tall around a concrete bird bath that sat tilted and empty. Newspapers were piling up on the porch steps, some still in their plastic sleeves, others waterlogged from recent rain. I parked and sat for a moment, looking at the house. It felt like looking at a beautiful dress that had been left too long in the closet, still lovely but showing signs of neglect. The front door was painted red, or had been once. Now it was more of a faded pink, like a valentine left in the sun. I rang the doorbell and heard it echo inside, one of those old-fashioned chimes that played a little tune. Westminster, maybe. I waited, counting the seconds, wondering if anyone was home. A squirrel ran across the porch roof, and somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn, the sound carrying on the quiet morning air. I rang again, then knocked, the sound hollow against the old wood. I was about to leave the wallet in the mailbox with a note when I heard shuffling footsteps inside, slow and deliberate, accompanied by a rhythmic tapping sound. The door opened just a crack, held by a brass chain that had gone green with age. One blue eye peered out at me, the same eye from the driver's license, but now surrounded by many more lines, like a road map of years lived. The eye was suspicious at first, wary, like maybe I was trying to sell something or convert someone. "Mr. Fitzgerald?" I said, trying to sound friendly and non-threatening. "My name is Jennifer Lawson. I found your wallet at Hannigan's grocery." The eye widened, and I heard him fumbling with the chain, metal scraping against wood. "My wallet? Oh my goodness! Just a moment, dear." When the door opened fully, I saw Walter Eugene Fitzgerald was using an aluminum walker, the tennis balls on the bottom worn flat from use. His hands were shaking slightly, whether from age or emotion I couldn't tell. He was wearing a cardigan that had seen better days, brown wool with patches on the elbows, and a button missing near the bottom. His slippers looked like they might fall apart at any moment, held together with what appeared to be electrical tape. But his eyes were bright and alert, sharp with intelligence despite his age. "My wallet?" he said again, his voice scratchy but warm, like a wool blanket that had been washed too many times. "Oh, thank goodness, I've been looking everywhere. Thought I was losing my mind. Tore the whole kitchen apart this morning. Come in, please." I tried to protest that I needed to leave, that I was just dropping it off. But he was already shuffling back into the house, the walker tapping against the hardwood floor. He clearly expected me to follow, and something about the way he moved, careful but determined, made it impossible to just leave him there. The inside of the house was dim, heavy curtains drawn against the morning sun. It smelled like old books and lemon furniture polish and something else. Loneliness, maybe, if loneliness had a smell. It was the scent of still air and dust motes dancing in the slivers of light from the drawn curtains, the smell of a place where time passed without being noticed. The furniture looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. A brown plaid couch with crocheted doilies on the arms, a recliner with a TV tray next to it holding a half-finished crossword puzzle, and a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. But what caught my attention, what made me stop in my tracks, were the photographs. They covered every surface: the mantel, the side tables, the walls. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Pictures of Walter in uniform, young and serious. Pictures of him with Betty through the years, at their wedding, holding babies, at birthday parties and graduations. Their whole life together spread out like a museum exhibit. One wall was entirely devoted to what must have been their children and grandchildren. School photos marched in neat rows, showing the progression from gap-toothed kindergarteners to serious-looking high school graduates. There were photos from the 1960s in those strange color tones that made everyone look slightly orange. Photos from the 80s with big hair and bigger smiles, recent digital prints that looked too sharp next to their aged companions. "Let me get you something to drink," Walt said, already heading toward what I assumed was the kitchen, his progress slow but steady. "It's the least I can do. You have no idea what this means to me." "Really, Mr. Fitzgerald, I can't stay." "Nonsense," he said, not turning around. "And call me Walt, everyone does, or did. I haven't had a visitor in... well, it's been a while. Please, it would mean so much to have someone to talk to. It gets pretty quiet here." Something in his voice made me check my watch again. I still had 45 minutes. Emma wouldn't worry if I was a few minutes late, and the desperation hiding under his polite words tugged at something in my chest. "Okay," I said, "but just for a minute." The kitchen was a step back in time, all yellow Formica countertops and daisy-patterned wallpaper. The appliances were that particular shade of avocado green that hadn't been popular since disco was king, but it was clean, meticulously so, like he spent a lot of time making sure everything was just right. A 1985 calendar hung on the wall, stopped forever on December, with a photo of a covered bridge in snow. He poured me a glass of lemonade from a glass pitcher in the fridge, his hands shaking enough that some splashed on the counter. He wiped it up immediately with a dish rag that had been folded precisely by the sink. The fridge, when it was open, revealed its sparse contents: a half-gallon of milk, some lunch meat in a Ziploc bag that looked questionable at best, a few eggs, and not much else. The freezer held only ice cube trays and a single frozen dinner. "I make it from scratch," he said about the lemonade, pride evident in his voice. "Betty's recipe. She always said store-bought tasted like furniture polish. Have to use real lemons, you know. None of that concentrated nonsense." We sat at a small round table with a checked tablecloth, and I noticed how he lowered himself carefully into the chair, gripping the table edge for support. The lemonade was perfect. Tart and sweet and cold, with little bits of pulp that proved it really was homemade. "I can't tell you how grateful I am," he said, clutching the wallet like it might disappear again. "That wallet? It's got everything in it. Was going to pay for groceries, but then I couldn't find it. Searched my pockets a dozen times in the store. Probably looked like a crazy old man. Finally gave up and came home. Thought maybe I'd left it here, but then I couldn't find it here either. Was starting to think maybe I'd imagined having it at all." I watched as he opened it immediately. Not to count the money, but to check on that old photograph. His face changed when he saw it was still there, years falling away as he smiled. He touched it gently with one finger, like he was saying hello. "Betty?" I asked gently. He nodded, still looking at the photo. "Passed 2 years ago this December. December 15th, 3:20 in the afternoon. 68 years we were married. Can you imagine? 68 years. Kids today don't even date that many months." He looked up at me. "This was taken right before I shipped out to Korea. She was 18, I was 19. Thought we were so grown up. She wrote me a letter every single day I was gone, 347 letters. Still have every one of them, up in a shoebox in the bedroom closet. He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to remember I was there. His blue eyes sharpened as he studied me, taking in my secondhand clothes, the tiredness around my eyes, the way I'd checked my watch 3 times since sitting down. "You could have kept this, you know," he said, tapping the wallet. "That's a lot of money. More than most people see at once these days." "It wasn't mine to keep," I said simply, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "Times are tough?" he asked, but gently, like he was asking about the weather. I shrugged, not wanting to dump my problems on this old man. "I'm managing." "I remember what that means," he said with a slight smile. "Used to manage plenty when Betty and I were first married. Had weeks where we'd manage on potato soup and hope. She could make $1 stretch further than anyone I ever met. Used to darn my socks so many times they were more thread than sock. But we were happy. Lord, we were happy." He started pulling $100 bills from the wallet, laying them on the table between us. "Please, let me give you something for your trouble. A reward. You came all this way." "No," I said firmly, putting my hand over his to stop him. His skin was papery thin, marked with age spots like continents on an ancient map. "I didn't do it for a reward." "Then why?" he asked, genuinely curious. $2,000 is a lot of money to someone who's managing. I thought about it for a moment. Really thought about it. Why hadn't I kept it? God knows I needed it. Because it was the right thing to do. Because my daughter is watching everything I do, and I want her to know that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And because... I hesitated, then continued. Because someone kept a 70-year-old photo in their wallet. That's someone who holds on to things that matter. I couldn't take that from them. Walt smiled then, and I could see the young soldier from the photograph in that smile. "You're raising her right. Your daughter. How old?" 12, I said, and felt my own smile forming. She's everything. Smart as a whip, too. Wants to be a marine biologist. Don't know where she got that from. We've never even seen the ocean. But she's determined." "I remember 12, he said. "Our granddaughter just turned 13, lives in San Diego. My son moved out there for work, some computer thing I don't understand. Haven't seen her in... well, it's been too long. He's busy with his own life. They all are. That's how it should be, I suppose." There was a loneliness in his voice that made my chest tight. I glanced at my watch. 30 minutes. But I found myself not wanting to leave just yet. "Walt," I said, making a decision I hadn't planned on making. "Have you eaten lunch?" He looked embarrassed, glancing away. "Was going to make a sandwich. That lunch meat might still be good." "How about I make us both something?" I said, already standing up. "I noticed you've got eggs in there. I make a pretty good omelet. My daughter says it's the only thing I can cook without burning, but she's exaggerating. I only burn things sometimes." His face lit up like I'd offered him gold, like I'd just told him Christmas was coming early. That would be wonderful. If you have time, I don't want to keep you." "I have time," I said, and meant it. I called the school from Walt's old rotary phone, a heavy black thing that could probably survive a nuclear blast, and arranged for Emma to go home with her friend Chloe for a couple of hours. Chloe's mom, Patricia, was used to this by now. We traded off helping each other when work schedules got complicated. Then I set about making lunch for 2 in Walt's kitchen. The eggs were fresh, thankfully, and I found some cheese that wasn't too far past its date, and half an onion wrapped in plastic wrap. As I cooked, whisking eggs in a bowl that probably older than me, Walt told me stories. He talked about Korea, where he'd served as a medic with the 25th Infantry Division. "Coldest I've ever been in my life," he said. "Cold that went right through you, made your bones ache. But we took care of each other. That's what you do. You take care of each other." He told me about coming home to Betty, how she'd waited at the train station wearing a yellow dress he'd never seen before. Said she bought it special for my homecoming. Spent a month's worth of grocery money on it. But Lord, she was beautiful, like sunshine after all that snow. About building a life together in Millbrook, buying this house for $8,000 in 1954. Thought we'd never be able to afford it. $8,000! Might as well have been $1 million. But Betty's father co-signed the loan, and we made every payment. Never missed a one. About their 3 kids, Daniel, the oldest, now in California, Susan, who lived in Chicago and was a teacher like her mother had been, and Robert, who died in a car accident at 23, just 2 years after getting married. Betty never quite got over that. You don't, you know. You learn to carry it, but you never get over it. About their 7 grandchildren, scattered across the country like seeds blown by the wind. About how Betty used to make the best pot roast in 3 counties, and how church ladies still asked for her recipe, not knowing he'd never learned it. About how quiet the house had been since she'd gone. "I don't drive much anymore," he admitted as we ate the omelets at his small table. "Vision isn't what it was. Scared I'll hurt someone. That's why I had all that cash. Grocery store delivers if you pay cash. They don't trust checks from old folks, and I never did learn those computer banking things. Was going to stock up. Winter's coming, and last year I got snowed in for a week. Lived on crackers and canned soup. Promised myself that wouldn't happen again." "How often do they deliver?" I asked, trying not to think about this old man alone for a week, rationing crackers while snow piled up outside. "Once a month if I remember to call. Sometimes I forget. The days run together when you're alone. Monday feels like Thursday, Thursday feels like Sunday. Only know what day it is by which shows are on TV." After lunch, I helped him organize his medications into one of those weekly pill containers I bought at the dollar store down the street. It was clear he'd been struggling to keep track. There were half-empty bottles everywhere, some expired, some duplicates. We made a list of what he was supposed to take and when, and I taped it to the bathroom mirror where he'd see it every morning. We made a grocery list together, and I promised to help him call in an order before I left. He tried to include fancy things, steaks and fresh salmon and out-of-season fruit, but I gently steered him toward practical items that would last. Canned goods, pasta, peanut butter, things that would keep him fed if he got snowed in again. But first, I found myself washing the dishes while he dried, him telling me about the time Betty entered a pie contest at the county fair and came in second to her own mother. Apple pie it was, Betty's specialty, but her mother, my mother-in-law, Helen, that woman could bake like angels were guiding her hands, caused quite the Thanksgiving discussion that year. Betty kept saying Helen must have cheated somehow, maybe used store-bought crust. Helen just smiled and kept eating pie. They didn't speak for 2 weeks after, which was hard since we all lived on the same street back then. I was putting the last plate away. Good china he'd insisted on using, with little blue flowers around the rim, when I noticed a guitar case in the corner of the living room. It was covered in a fine layer of dust, pushed back behind a fake ficus tree that had seen better days. "You play?" I asked. His face changed, closing off a little. "Used to. Haven't touched it since Betty passed. She loved when I played. Said it's what made her fall in love with me in the first place. Some fool kid playing guitar at a USO dance trying to impress the pretty girls. Worked, though. She danced with me 3 times that night. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven." "Would you play something now?" I asked, then immediately regretted it when I saw the pain flash across his face. "It's been so long," he said, but he was already looking at the case, like it was calling to him. "Please, just one song?" He made his way to the guitar case slowly, using furniture for support instead of his walker. I could see his hands trembling as he undid the latches, and they weren't steady age tremors this time. The case opened with a soft sigh, releasing the smell of old wood and possibilities. The guitar was beautiful. A 1952 Gibson J45, he told me later. Sunburst finish, worn smooth where his arms had held it for decades. He lifted it out like it was made of spun glass, cradling it against his chest. His fingers found their places automatically. muscle memory taking over despite the arthritis that had twisted his joints. He tuned it carefully, each string singing out in the quiet house. Then, without saying anything, he started to play. It was "I'll Be Seeing You." And his voice was thin but true as he sang softly, almost to himself at first. "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." I thought about all the places that song mentioned: the small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel. All the places he and Betty must have been seeing each other all these years, even after she was gone. His voice grew stronger as he sang, years falling away with each verse. When he finished, there were tears in his eyes, and definitely in mine too. We sat in silence for a moment, the last note hanging in the air like a prayer. "Thank you," he said quietly, setting the guitar back in its case with infinite care. I'd forgotten how that felt. Betty used to sit right where you're sitting, listening to me play after dinner, every night for 68 years. I'd forgotten how it felt to have someone listen. I helped him call in a grocery order before I left, making sure to include fresh vegetables and fruit along with the non-perishables. The person on the phone at Hannigan's knew him by name, asked how he'd been. I made sure they had his correct address, arranged for delivery the next morning. He tried again to give me money, pulling those $100 bills out like they were nothing, and again I refused. "Then how can I repay you?" he asked, genuinely distressed. "You've given me so much today, more than you know." "You already did," I said. "That song was worth more than anything in that wallet." As I was leaving, he pressed something into my hand. It wasn't money. It was a business card, yellowed and worn soft at the edges. "Fitzgerald and Sons Hardware, Walter Fitzgerald, proprietor," it read in raised lettering that had gone flat with age. "That was my store," he said with pride. "Started it in 1962 with $500 and a lot of hope. Built it into the biggest hardware store in 3 counties. Sold it 15 years ago to retire. Betty said it was time to travel, see the world. We made it to Florida twice before she got sick. But the new owner, Jim Bradley, he's a good man. Worked for me 20 years before buying me out. You tell him Walt Fitzgerald sent you if you ever need anything. He'll remember me." I drove home thinking about Walt, about Betty, about all those photographs and the dusty house that was too big for one person. About the guitar gathering dust and the songs that hadn't been sung. About how loneliness could fill up a house bigger than any family ever could. When I picked up Emma from Chloe's house, she was full of chatter about her day. Science class had dissected owl pellets. "Gross, but so cool, Mom!" And she'd found 3 mouse skulls in hers. Her teacher said she had a natural talent for biology, which had made her practically glow. I found myself really listening, storing up her words like treasures, seeing her animated face like I was taking my own mental photograph. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked as we pulled into our apartment complex, the brick buildings looking shabbier than usual after Walt's neighborhood. "You look weird, like sad but happy at the same time?" "I'm good, sweetheart, just thinking." "About what?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 12 years old, all knees and elbows and dreams too big for our small apartment. Brown eyes like her father's, but everything else, the determination, the stubbornness, the tender heart, that was all me, or at least I hoped it was. "About how lucky I am," I said, and meant it. "Because of me?" she asked with a grin, already knowing the answer. "Especially because of you." That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at our small kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix, and made a decision. The business card sat in front of me like a possibility I hadn't known existed. I called the number the next morning, my hands shaking almost as bad as Walt's had been. "Bradley's Hardware," a cheerful voice answered. "How can I help you?" "Hi, Mr. Bradley, this is Jennifer Lawson. Walt Fitzgerald gave me your number." There was a pause, then the voice got warmer, like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Walt, how is that old rascal? Haven't seen him in months. Been meaning to get over there, but you know how it is. Time gets away from you." I explained about finding the wallet, returning it, and discovering that Walt was pretty isolated. I could hear Jim Bradley's breathing change as I talked, getting heavier with each detail. "I had no idea," he said finally, and I could hear the regret in his voice. "Walt was like a second father to me. Taught me everything about running this place. Hell, taught me everything about being a man, if I'm honest. I should have been checking on him. Should have known Betty's passing would hit him hard. What kind of person doesn't check on family?" "The busy kind," I said gently. "The kind that assumes someone else is doing it." "That's no excuse," he said firmly. "Tell you what, Ms. Lawson, Walt said to help you if you needed anything. How about we help each other? I've been looking for someone part-time for the morning shift. The pay's not huge, $14 an hour to start, but it's steady. Good benefits after 90 days. And maybe between the two of us, we can make sure Walt's okay too?" That's how I ended up with a job at Bradley's Hardware and a standing Tuesday lunch date with Walt Fitzgerald. The first Tuesday, I brought Emma after school. She was shy at first, intimidated by the big house and the formal way Walt stood when we arrived, like he was receiving royalty instead of a tired woman and her 12-year-old daughter. But then he showed her his collection of antique marbles. He had hundreds, stored in old mason jars, and suddenly they were friends. "This one's called a Buddha. See the way the colors swirl? And this here's a cat's eye. That was always my favorite as a boy." Emma listened with the same intensity she usually reserved for her marine biology documentaries. While they looked at marbles, I made lunch. Nothing fancy, grilled cheese and tomato soup. But Walt acted like it was a feast. "Haven't had a proper grilled cheese in years," he said. "Betty used to make them with 3 kinds of cheese. Never could get the proportions right myself." After lunch, Emma did her homework at Walt's kitchen table while he helped her with her math. Turns out he'd been quite the numbers guy in his day, keeping the books for his hardware store without a calculator or computer. "You've got to see the relationships between numbers," he told her, pencil flying across scratch paper. "They're like a family. 10 is the parent, 5 and 2 are the children. Once you see how they fit together, math becomes a story instead of a problem." Emma, who'd been struggling with fractions for weeks, suddenly lit up. Oh, I get it. It's like pieces of a pie, right? And you're just figuring out how many pieces different people get?" "Exactly." Walt beamed at her like she'd just discovered electricity. "You're a natural. Going to be a scientist for sure." "Marine biologist," Emma corrected. "I'm going to study dolphins and whales and maybe discover a new species of fish that lives so deep nobody's seen it yet." "You know what marine biologists need?" Walt said seriously. "Good, sturdy equipment. Waterproof containers, strong rope, reliable tools. I might know a guy at a hardware store." Emma giggled, and the sound filled that old kitchen like music. In return for math help, Emma would tell Walt all about her life, her friends, her dreams of the ocean she'd never seen. She showed him videos on my phone of dolphins jumping, of coral reefs teeming with life, of whales singing in the deep. Walt watched with the same wonder Emma did, asking questions, genuinely interested. "Never knew fish could be so colorful," he said once, watching a video of tropical fish around a reef. "God must have been in a good mood that day, using up all his bright paints." Jim Bradley was as good as his word. Not only did he give me a job, but he organized what he called the Walt Brigade. Different people from the community who remembered the hardware store, who remembered Walt teaching them how to fix a leaky faucet or pick the right drill bit, would stop by to check on him. The mailman started bringing the mail to the door instead of the mailbox, giving Walt someone to chat with for a few minutes each day. The teenager next door began mowing Walt's lawn, refusing payment but accepting guitar lessons instead. The grocery deliveries became weekly, with fresh produce appearing regularly, paid for by store credit that Jim Bradley mysteriously discovered Walt had accumulated. The garden club ladies descended one Saturday with trowels and determination, filling those empty flower boxes with mums and pansies. Walt sat on the porch, supervising, telling them stories about Betty's gardens, how she'd won the Millbrook Garden Tour Award 6 years running. She had a way with roses, he said, watching the ladies work. Said the secret was to sing to them, old hymns mostly. Amazing Grace was their favorite. But the biggest change came at Thanksgiving. I'd invited Walt to join Emma and me for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small turkey and the fixings in our cramped apartment. I was worried he'd be uncomfortable in our small space after his big house, but he'd accepted immediately. "Haven't had a real Thanksgiving since Betty passed," he'd said quietly. "Last year I had a TV dinner, turkey and stuffing," the box said, but it all tasted like cardboard. Even put on a tie to eat it, trying to make it feel special. Just made me feel foolish. He'd shown up with his guitar and a photo album thick as a dictionary, and after dinner, while Emma made popcorn strings for our small artificial Christmas tree, he'd played songs and told stories about each photograph. "This one," he said, pointing to a picture of Betty in a ridiculous hat with fake fruit piled on top, "was at the Kentucky Derby 1978. She bet on a horse named Whisper's Promise because she liked the name. Came in dead last, but Betty said any day at the races with me was a winning day. She wore that hat to embarrass me, I'm sure of it. Said if she was going to lose money, she might as well look memorable doing it." Emma had curled up next to him on our worn couch, absorbed in the stories, occasionally asking questions. "Did you go to many horse races? What happened to the hat? Did Grandma Betty like to gamble?" That last question had made me freeze. When had she started calling Betty Grandma? But Walt just smiled and answered like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your Grandma Betty liked to take chances on things. Not gambling, really, but she believed in long shots. Believed in people who didn't believe in themselves. That's how she was." Later that night, as I tucked her in, I asked her about it. "Why'd you call her Grandma Betty?" She just shrugged, pulling her blanket up to her chin. "I don't know, it just felt right. Walt tells so many stories, it feels like I know her. And he feels like my grandpa, so she must be my grandma, right?" A week before Christmas, Walt called me. His voice excited as Emma's when she talked about discovering new fish species. "Jenny, you'll never guess, my son is coming for Christmas. He's bringing the whole family. Says he's been thinking about what's really important, and he realized it's been too long. 3 years since he's been home. 3 years. I think maybe he heard about our Tuesday lunches from someone. Maybe a certain hardware store owner who can't keep his mouth shut." Jim Bradley had indeed made some calls, tracking down Daniel Fitzgerald in San Diego, and having what he called a come-to-Jesus talk about family and time and not waiting until it's too late. "That's wonderful, Walt," I said, genuinely happy for him, even as something twisted in my chest. Of course his real family should come for Christmas. That's how it should be. "I want you and Emma to come for Christmas dinner," he continued. "The whole brigade, actually. Jim and his family, the garden club ladies, everyone. Betty always said the more the merrier, and I'm starting to remember why. This house needs noise again. Needs laughter and too many people and not enough chairs." "We'll be there," I promised. The week before Christmas, I found an envelope in my work locker at the hardware store. Inside was a Christmas card with a snowy scene of Millbrook's covered bridge, the same one from the calendar in Walt's kitchen. With it were 5 $100 bills. The card read, in Walt's careful handwriting, "For Emma's new shoes and whatever else she needs. This isn't charity and it isn't payment. It's what family does. Love, Grandpa Walt." I sat in the break room and cried, holding those bills like they were precious documents. Which, in a way, they were. Documentation that Emma and I weren't alone anymore, that we'd found our way into something bigger than ourselves. I tried to give it back, of course. Drove to his house that evening, ready with all my arguments about how we were fine, how he'd already given us so much. But Walt just sat in his recliner, hands folded over his stomach, and let me run out of steam. "You done?" he asked when I finally stopped talking. I nodded, deflated. "Good. Now listen. You gave me my life back, Jenny. You reminded me that there's still good in this world, still reasons to play guitar and tell stories and make connections. You brought Emma into my life, and that girl, she's like sunshine, you know that? Pure sunshine. She calls me Grandpa Walt, and every time she does, I feel Betty smiling somewhere. Let me do this small thing. Let an old man feel useful again. Emma got her new shoes. Nike ones even, the kind the other kids wore. And a winter coat that actually fit, purple with fake fur around the hood that she loved so much, she wore it inside until I made her take it off. And for the first time in months, I paid all my bills on time and still had money left over for groceries that weren't ramen noodles. I bought fresh vegetables and fruit, and even a small roast for Sunday dinner. Christmas Day at Walt's house was like something out of a movie, one of those feel-good ones they play endlessly in December. The house was full of people and laughter and music. Someone had strung lights on the porch, and there was a real tree in the living room for the first time in 3 years, so tall it brushed the ceiling. Walt's son Daniel turned out to be a quieter version of his father, with the same blue eyes and the same way of really listening when you talked. He pulled me aside while Walt was teaching Emma a chord on the guitar. The two of them bent over the instrument like conspirators. "Thank you," he said simply, "for being there when I wasn't, for reminding me what I was missing. I got so caught up in my own life I forgot that Dad was alone. Mom would have been furious with me." "Your dad's pretty special," I said, watching Walt position Emma's small fingers on the frets with infinite patience. "Yeah," Daniel agreed, his voice thick. "He really is. I forgot that for a while. Almost too long." The house rang with music that Christmas. Walt played every song anyone requested, his arthritis forgotten in the joy of an audience. Emma played Silent Night hesitantly, just the melody line, but everyone applauded like she'd performed a concert. The garden club ladies sang harmonies that spoke of years of church choirs. Even Jim Bradley contributed a surprisingly good baritone. At one point, I found myself in the kitchen with Daniel's wife, Maria, both of us washing dishes and watching through the doorway, as Walt showed his granddaughter from San Diego the same marble collection he'd shown Emma. "He looks 10 years younger," Maria said softly. "When we visited 3 years ago after Mom's funeral, he barely spoke. Sat in that chair and stared at nothing. I told Daniel we were losing him, but he said Dad just needed time. Thank God you didn't give him any more time to disappear." "He saved us too," I said, and found myself telling her about our struggles, about finding the wallet, about how Walt had become the grandfather Emma never had. "Family finds a way," Maria said, handing me a plate to dry. "Blood or not, family finds a way." That was 3 years ago. Walt's 90 now and still going strong. He plays guitar at the community center twice a month, has a standing chess game with Jim Bradley every Thursday, and never misses Emma's school concerts. She's 15 and plays guitar almost as well as he does now. They perform duets sometimes, old songs and new ones, her young voice blending with his weathered one in harmonies that make people stop whatever they're doing to listen. As for me, I'm the assistant manager at Bradley's Hardware now, and it turns out I'm pretty good with numbers too. Must be all those Tuesday afternoon math sessions where Walt taught both Emma and me to see the stories in spreadsheets and budgets. The wobbly leg on our kitchen table is finally fixed. One night I brought home a wood screw, a washer, and some wood glue from the store. It took me 10 minutes to make it solid, something I'd put off for years because I didn't have the tools or the knowledge. It felt like more than just fixing a table. It felt like I was finally building a life that wouldn't fall apart. We've expanded the Walt Brigade into a community program that checks on all our elderly neighbors, making sure no one gets forgotten, no one gets left behind. We have a name for it now, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, and a budget from the city council and volunteers from 3 churches and the high school. But it started with a wallet full of cash and a lonely old man who kept his wife's picture for 70 years. Sometimes I think about that morning in Hannigan's grocery. about how close I came to walking past that wallet, or worse, keeping it. I think about how different life would be if I'd made that choice. Not just my life, but Walt's, Emma's, the whole community that's grown up around one small act of doing the right thing. Walt likes to say I saved him, but the truth is we saved each other. He reminded me that wealth isn't measured in the bills in your wallet, but in the connections you make, the stories you share, the love you give and receive. He taught Emma that family isn't just about blood, but about showing up again and again, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's needed. Last week, we were having our regular Tuesday lunch. It's at my apartment now, since stairs have gotten harder for Walt, when Emma asked him to tell the story about the wallet again. She asks for it every few months, like kids ask for their favorite bedtime story. He laughed, his voice still strong despite the years. Why? You've heard it 100 times. You could probably tell it better than me by now. Because, she said, setting down her fork and looking at him with those serious brown eyes, it's the story of how we became a family. Walt's eyes misted over, and he reached for his guitar, the same old Gibson that had gathered dust for 2 years after Betty died. Well then, he said, fingers finding the strings like old friends, every good story deserves a song. He made it up on the spot, like he often does now, verses about frozen peas and leather wallets, about kindness and choices, and the way life surprises you when you're paying attention. Emma hummed along, already memorizing the melody, while I sat at my kitchen table and felt rich beyond measure. And in that moment, in that small apartment where I'd once counted $17.32 as my entire wealth, with my daughter learning a new song and the man who'd become her grandfather creating music from memories, I realized something. The wallet had been full of money, yes, $2,000 that could have solved my immediate problems. But what I'd really found that day in Hannigan's grocery was so much more valuable. I'd found my way home. These days, whenever I pass Hannigan's grocery, and I shop there regularly now, able to afford more than just ramen and hope, I always check behind the frozen peas. Not because I'm hoping to find another wallet, but because it reminds me to look for the unexpected blessings, the hidden opportunities to connect, to help, to build something beautiful out of an ordinary Tuesday morning. Walt's teaching Emma I'll be seeing you now. She's mastered the chord changes, and they're working on the kind of emotional shading that turns notes into music. Feel it, he tells her. Music isn't just sound. It's story, it's heart, it's everything you can't say with words alone. And I think about Betty, the woman I never met but feel like I know through all of Walt's stories. I think she'd be happy to see her house full of laughter again, to see Walt's fingers dancing on guitar strings, to know that her husband found family again in the most unexpected way. Sometimes when the light hits just right through the kitchen windows, I swear I can feel her there, listening to the music, smiling at the way love multiplied instead of divided. Walt keeps 2 photos in his wallet now. The original, Betty and him before Korea, edges soft with age and handling. And a newer one, Emma at her spring concert, holding the guitar Walt bought her for her 13th birthday, wearing the purple dress we found at the thrift store and altered to fit perfectly. Family photos, he calls them. All of them. The Tuesday lunch crowd has grown. Sometimes Daniel drives in from San Diego, bringing his family. Jim Bradley closes the hardware store for an hour to join us. The teenager who mows Walt's lawn, Marcus Thompson, stops by with his guitar, eager to learn new songs. The kitchen gets crowded, voices overlapping, laughter spilling into the hallway. Just like it should be, Walt always says, looking around with satisfaction. Betty would love this. She always said a quiet house was a lonely house. Emma's working on a science project about ocean acidification now, with Walt as her unofficial research assistant. He's learned to use the computer at the library, hunting down articles and studies for her. If my granddaughter's going to save the oceans, he says, I better learn what needs saving. The grinding noise in my car got fixed last year. Jim Bradley's nephew runs a shop and gave me the Walt Brigade discount. The yellow notice hasn't appeared on my refrigerator in 3 years. Emma has shoes that fit and dreams that don't seem impossible anymore. But more than that, we have Tuesday lunches and Thursday chess games and Saturday morning trips to the farmer's market where Walt knows every vendor by name. We have Christmas dinners with too many people and not enough chairs, exactly the way Walt likes it. We have guitar lessons and math tutoring and stories that get better with each telling. We have family. All because one morning, reaching behind frozen peas I couldn't afford, I found a wallet I could have kept. All because an old man held onto a 70-year-old photograph like it was the most precious thing in the world. All because sometimes the right choice leads to rewards you never could have imagined. "Play it again," Emma says, and Walt's fingers find the strings once more. "I'll be seeing you" fills our small apartment, escaping through the windows into the October afternoon. Somewhere, maybe, Betty's listening. Somewhere, certainly, the world is a little less lonely because people choose to see each other, to really see each other, in all the old familiar places and the new ones, too. The wallet that changed everything sits in Walt's pocket still, worn even thinner now, holding its photographs like promises. Promises kept, and promises continuing, measured not in $100 bills, but in Tuesday lunches and guitar lessons and the way Emma calls him Grandpa Walt like it's the most natural thing in the world. Which, of course, it is. And every time I see the blank space where that yellow notice used to hang on my refrigerator, I remember the day I chose a photo over a paycheck, and how that choice gave us everything.